Hey everybody, Jace here. Just want to remind you that on every one of these 12 days of the Comic Source videos, you can win 1 month free of Global Comics. And on Christmas Day, we'll be giving away a free year of Global Comics. All you have to do to enter is just go over to the YouTube channel and leave a comment on any particular episode that you've checked out. If you listen to it audio only, again, just head over to YouTube, do a search for the Comic Source. Leave a comment, and everybody who enters a comment for a particular video, I will select at random a person for that video to win the code to get a month of free Global Comics, which is the premier destination for digital comics. Got the best user interface I've ever seen for digital comics. You can read comics on your phone. Over 375,000 comics so far in the library. It's growing daily, so it doesn't cost you a thing to check it out. Again, just leave a comment on the YouTube video for any of the 12 days of the Comic Source YouTube videos, and you'll be entered to win. So hope everybody's having a really fun and enjoyable holiday season, and thanks for joining us for these 12 days of the Comic Source episodes. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. It's our inaugural 12 days of The Comic Source episodes for the year 2024, and I'm super happy to be kicking it off with a super talented writer, friend of the show, Jeremy Adams. Hey Jeremy, it's always good to see you, man.
Hey. Pump, pump.
Oh yeah, 100%. From the first time that we had you on to talk about Flash, your profile has risen. You're getting more work at DC. Rocky and I both have been pounding that drum forever. Give this guy more books. Give this guy more books. Yeah. So from Flash to Green Lantern, now you have the Green Lantern core book coming. You have this fractal lantern, fractured spectrum thing starting. Yeah. You've got Aquaman. You've got Flash over at Mad Cave. Let's just start off with the obvious question. Do you still have time to sleep, man? Like, we wanted all the success for you, but now I feel like...
Oh man, so my capacity is large. There's still a lot I want to do. There's a lot I beg them to let me do, and they just look at me like, that's a dumb idea. And I'm like, it's amazing. What are you talking about?
Well, we have also brought up the fact that you seem to be on the Jeff Johns track, being that you started with Flash and then Green Lantern and then Aquaman.
I told him that too. I said, I have a checklist, Jeff. And he thought that was amusing. I go, I got to start a company next year.
Well, it took him a while to get there, but the other thing that I'm curious about, and then everybody's like, just talk about the books. We'll get into that, but I am curious. You have built somewhat of a following. When you left Flash, there was this outcry of people like, oh no, he was so great on Flash. You're moving over to Green Lantern. I know some people followed you over there, but you've been on Flash or on Green Lantern now for a few years. You've got the other stuff over at Mad Cave, like I said. Do you feel like you have people that aren't like necessarily fans of the character, but people that are your fans that are going to follow you to follow whatever and read whatever you write?
I don't know. I mean, people say that, I'm grateful. We've talked about this before. I was very close to doing like a career on this year, and then I chickened out. There was something that happened, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And that'll be the real mark to see if people follow me. You know me enough now, that I vacillate. I'm like really grateful to have this job. I'm incredibly humbled that people would read anything I write. And I'm also just, paralyzed in fear that really they just hate, somebody's going to stop me from doing this. But people have said that, and I'm really grateful. I'm also trying to build a reputation that's like, I don't know how to put this. I want the Tom Hanks vibe. Like, I'm a nice guy, and also like, you're coming to my books. It's going to be fun comic books. It's going to be comic book stuff. They're very classic in nature because I think that's what I love and that's what I enjoy. And if I was to deviate from that, I would let everybody know. Like, I'm doing something so dark and twisted. Just understand. But right now, I feel like I built up a lot of trust, and I think that was a lot of the case with the Wally. The run with Wally was very much me saying like, no, I understand the landscape of that character and the fact that he's been the human pinata. So like, trust me, he's going to be okay. And I know I've succeeded in terms of at least Wally, because people, especially people that find the run now, are talking about how, Wally, everything just goes right for Wally. Wally's just so happy and it's all good. And I'm like, if you think that's true, then I have done my job.
Yeah.
Because that means that you do not remember the last decade.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm grateful.
I think part of it though is that you're such a fan of the characters, in the same way that we're fans of the characters. And so, and I wouldn't say that I always expect your stuff to be, happy and bright and positive.
Right.
Because I mean, that's what you get from the DC universe, and it's a very hopeful universe. But I almost think if there comes a time where you do have something darker to tell, I think it's going to land with that much more impact and be like, oh my God, this is, because I know your level of talent, you're going to nail it. But if you decide to do something dark, it's going to be like, oh my God, this is.
There have been a couple times, 2 or 3 times, that I've tried to do a really dark turn on a book. Like I tried to do a dark turn on the Flash at one point, and I tried to do my first pitch for the Flash was so crazy, and they were just like, they were like, no. And then I had another pitch that was really dark. And then even recently I said, hey, I want to do this thing. And they were like, no, we don't want to see that. Like, I mean, and I was like, the fact that you're reacting that way is exactly what I want to get. I want to get people to go, holy crap, that's messed up or whatever. So, to a degree, they put brakes on me sometimes, because it's not like I don't want to do it. It's just that sometimes the higher ups don't want to do those swings. They're scared too. And I definitely think they should be less scared. I think they should go, there are some things in like Green Lantern Corps and stuff that Morgan and I have talked about. And I'm like, I want to do this. And they're like, are you insane? And I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. See what happens. And they're like, no.
They're a little more risk adverse, I think, than they used to be. And that's probably a lot of the corporate overlords, bottom line type of stuff.
I think it is. But I also, maybe, I don't know enough about what goes on there, but there might be a level of like, hey, I do feel like, I don't know if this is true, but I do feel with like some of the writers, I feel like there's this feeling amongst DC and DC fans and DC just internally that we're trying to buy back fans, like trying to get people excited about the universe. And from somebody inside, I'm super excited about DC. Like not only is Josh and Tom and the two Toms and freaking Mark Waid, I feel like the books are really hitting. And then you have James Gunn on the media side, and it feels fun. It feels like, oh, this is great. Like we're doing some really cool stuff,
Yeah, and I think the All In era has been a big success, and maybe we get you on an Absolute book, and then maybe, I mean, that's supposed to be the darker universe, so maybe that's
I know. I don't even know what I would do. It would have to be something really bizarro, like Absolute. What was? Oh gosh, I can't think of his name. Who was Mr. Miracle's sidekick?
Oberon.
Gosh. Oberon, yeah. I had this one gag in this Lego movie that I did. I think it was DC Lego Superhero Girls, and we did this thing, and I can't believe they kept it in. It was like, this is a girl's property, and there's this moment where Oberon's teaching a class, and like he starts talking about something, and he's like, you don't want to go through what I've gone through, and you hear like Vietnam choppers and machine guns in the background, but then he snaps out of it, and he's talking about the circus. And it's just like, it's so funny that they let us do it. But yeah, Absolute Oberon.
Absolute Oberon. I'm in. I could see you doing that, or something just off the wall, like Absolute Firestorm, or Absolute.
Yeah, that would be cool. I have weirdly, I have like at least 3 ideas that are like tangentially in the DC universe, which I think is interesting. And they would be really fun to take place in the DC universe, but they're not like critically superheroes, like superhero. But I feel like I have to get a lot more, you know, what it is. It's all about sales in a way. That's how you get your power, you know. So someday they'll let me do a Batman title, and then
then the sky's the limit. Well, everybody, if you checked out our DC Spotlight this week over on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube, you saw that the finale, if you will, of the Civil Corp hit stands this week. It was really epic, really awesome, and kind of on that note of being epic. I remember when we had you on to talk about Green Lantern, and you were like, "Yeah, he's stuck on Earth," and it's Green Lantern. You have this itch to put him out in the cosmos and do this big space opera or whatever, but he's stuck on Earth, so I'm doing the best I can with it and what have you.
Yeah.
I've been so impressed with the level of scope that you've built from that. Okay, he's stuck on Earth, then Sinestro shows up, and then he manages to escape, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds. So you've just had this amazing, awesome issue where, we thought Theros was dead, then he's not. Baron's, got the revenant power. Right. I mean, it was just awesome. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Let's say that there's somebody that hasn't been reading your Green Lantern run at all. You're about to go to the next level with this fractured spectrum special that you're doing with Viken Marion on art, and then Fractal Lanterns coming out of that, and a lot of other stuff coming. So if somebody hasn't been reading and you had to recap what people need to know in order to jump on now, let's see how well you can kind of explain what's been going on.
I just did a copy of my daughter's commercial that they put out. So there's a cosmological force called the emotional spectrum. And what we found out is that in order for it not to go completely crazy, they had these central power batteries that have focused those energies. But those central power batteries are gone. So now there's one central power battery that we know of, which is the Green Lantern Corps central power battery. And those other energies are wild. And people and species and different things that express a massive amount of energy can manifest any of those parts of the emotional spectrum, and with bad endings to them, probably. Also, because there is no focused energy of the emotional spectrum, those colors collide, and it's this fractured spectrum, and these other lanterns or other people can manifest other emotions that have never been part of the main emotional spectrum. So like Nathan Broom, the fact that he was so, sorrowful after Carol left him at the altar in Vegas, he becomes this thing called the sorrow, which is, it's a gray lantern, but it's really a byproduct of the emotional spectrum being so jacked up. And I actually think, and I'll talk about it more in the book, but I actually think that there might be a piece of that in my brain that happens because of proximity to other emotional spectrum things. Like that happened to him because he was in proximity to her,
to Carol,
Yeah. And so I think that because this emotional spectrum is fractured, it's caused all these weird things. So they're like mutants, right? Like anybody can start manifesting these powers over the universe. So now after today, it's like you'll see it's like the Green Lantern Corps is back, but their job is not just to patrol the universe, it's to try to figure out how to help people that are manifesting these things, but also, the last panel of the spoilers for anybody who hasn't read it, but the Sorrow has been summoned to this planetoid or whatever, and there's the Starbreaker, who's like an emotional vampire, and he's basically speaking into this guy's ear, like, I can help you, not feel anymore. You just got to help me. And so that's where the fractured spectrum one shot that Viken Marriott, who I really am in love with his art. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy, mark my words, in a couple of years, everybody's going to be like, holy crap, how can I get some original art from that guy?
I have some.
Do you?
Yeah.
Son of a gun. He owes me some. I was like, you got to give me some.
When I first met Viken, he did He did a commission for me of the Karate Kid from Legion of
Oh, shut
Superheroes.
up.
Yeah,
You got to take a picture and send that to me. That sounds really good.
yeah. Yeah,
I
when I had
love
met
it.
him, he hadn't done any DC stuff. He was still just doing stuff over at Aspen.
I feel
Um,
like he's skyrocketing. And so I watching him do this book, it's really, really cool. And the book is much more succinct than I'm being right now. But the main point is like, hey, the emotional spectrum's broken and uh, everybody's manifesting emotional powers and there's this dark, the Starbreaker and sorrow are doing something. And you'll find out. And anybody that's followed me long enough knows I am the master of callbacks into my own books. So like and also like, there was a little I was like, oh man, I hope people have read War Journal at the point where,
yeah,
our books collide because obviously I Philip and I wrote that issue and then I was like, I'm taking all your toys, like Ellie I think is interesting and John I think has a lot of crazy stuff going on, but yeah, I think there's particular there's a Guy Gardner backup I did where he got with Kevin McGuire
yeah.
that people were like, well, what does this mean? And what's funny and what's hilarious to me is a lot of times I'll have an idea of what I want to do, and then I'll find out that like let's put in this case in the backup with Guy Gardner. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but then they changed what they were going to do in the Brainiac thing a little bit. So I was like, oh crap, Or no, they didn't change with Brainiac. It was like they told me that that Lobo couldn't be Lobo. I was like, what? Well, that doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
So I had to come up with another thing, but I always try to never let those threads just lie. I really want to make sense of them. So that particular story is going to have ramifications in the fractured spectrum, which will be fun.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's gonna be a wild time. And yeah, to your point about you hope people have read what was going on in War Journal because yeah,
Yeah,
that's where the Revenant stuff is. That's where Varon shows up, and then you link him by making him the nephew of Theros.
yeah,
They're gone for now. I'm gonna say
right,
because it feels like they're defeated, but you talk about callback. It doesn't feel like they're gone forever. We could
right.
possibly see them come back because we have no idea what's going to become of the United Planets now that Theros is
Right.
no
Right.
longer.
And that was interesting. I remember you being so mad about the United Planets thing.
Yeah,
And I was like, hold on. I didn't, first of all, we all know I didn't invent this thing.
yeah, 100%.
I'm taking, when I got on this book, I was looking at what was happening in prior to my run on Green Lantern, what was happening in the other books. Like in War Journal, you had the United Planets and you had the Durlans, and Philip was messing with Theros there. So that was already established as far as I was
Yeah,
concerned. And then you had from Jeff Thorne's run, you had this giant ball of source energy. And there was just one panel where I think it was Badge was had changed. His costume had changed from like a green to a blue or something. It's like, why am I look like this? And from that, like my brain went kablooey. And Paul Kaminsky, who's my editor, was like, you can just write a paragraph saying everything returns to normal. I'm like, hell no. Like, I'm a nerd. I got to explain it,
yeah,
in 20 issues, to me, it felt very organic because I love what I love about comic book universes, whether it's the big two or otherwise, I love a continuous universe. I love it when people do callbacks and when people are trying to integrate what other people have done into their story. And so that's how I operate. I definitely, you can tell the amount of stuff I've been incorporating, obviously from Jeff's run and Venditti run, and when I was doing Flash, everybody that came before. But yeah, it's I don't know where this train of thought was going, but my point being that yeah, it became a little. expansive. I mean, I tried to keep it on Earth. I knew what was going on in space, but then it was just like, there was just a moment where people were like, okay, you can do this. And I knew that the quarantine was giving, like, I knew there were probably other creators that were like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Stop letting us not go to space or whatever, or they'd have to find some way around it. But I'm a jerk because like you'll see, I'll put all this like the Unseeing is talking about the Star Heart, and people are like, what's that about? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we'll see if I get to tell that story someday. You know, Dove in the Absolute Power. Dove is like, whatever happened to Hawk? Like I'm telling all these other stories that no that I'm like, I have this great story in my head. You know. So
Yes.
I think to your point, I'm just a nerd that got the job, right? Like
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're one of us. You remember all these threads, and yeah, I remember when you telling me too about Green Lantern being stuck on Earth, and all I could think about is remember when Stan Lee made that rule of a Silver Surfer has to stay on Earth,
yeah.
and it was like of all the characters,
I know.
and it was the same thing with Green Lantern.
And it was exasperated by when we finally did go to space, and the first page I got back from Zermanico, and I was like, we are all idiots.
Yeah.
Like we are complete morons because his stuff on Earth was so amazing, but his stuff in space is so cinematic and it's massive. And so then it's like, oh my gosh, he can do anything. So usually my descriptions of the scripts are like, I just want to see what he can draw, dude. I'm like, oh, let's see an Owen landscape and you know, let me see the space cruiser and hey, this little double page spread, but like, and I've shown like this picture of like this ancient, beautiful artwork of this battle, and I'm like, just make this, you know, do what you do, you know, whatever. And there's this one stupid 2-page spread in this last comic, and you're like, this is insane. You can look at this over and over and find new things.
Stuff, yeah.
That's great.
He's so
good.
and the great thing about your run with him is it's gone on for so long. Like artists just don't stay on the same book as long as this guy's been on this book. Like he's drawn almost every issue. It's just fantastic.
There's a lot of begging. There's a lot of It's like, what do you want to do? You know,
let you do whatever you want. Just stay on the book.
I know.
But you mentioned callbacks, and I didn't even recognize who it was, that it was Starbreaker, and so I saw that it was him, and I remember. I think it's like the cover of Justice League '97, like Psychic Vampire. He doesn't look, because he's like all covered and shrouded or whatever. That's just such an iconic, because it's an issue from before I was born, but somehow I got it in my collection like very early on, and I read the crap out of that thing where like the cover's almost fallen off, and cover just always, it's a fantastic cover. And so when I was like, oh, this is who it is, like, so but I know Jeff had brought him into his run as well at one point. So did you have to go back and do a bunch of research?
I didn't know that. I'll have to go back and make sure I don't screw it up. I brought him in. He was possessed by Eclipso in the Flash.
That's right. Yep.
That's right where the Dr. Fate issue started. And but it was Mark Waid who suggested it to me when we were at lunch at Comic-Con, because I was thinking of like, oh, who should be blah, blah, blah. And Wade's like, it'd be perfect as this guy. And if you don't use him, I will. And I was like, I'll use him.
Yeah, if you...
It worked, and it works. The emotional vampire angle is going to be key piece of this.
Yeah, so if you look up Starbreaker, he comes up on the DC database as...
I'll do it later.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I like looking at him now while we're interviewing. Oh, really? Let's Google together, Jace.
He comes up as Luciphage, and it has Green Lantern Corps Volume 3, number 27 as an appearance. So that might even be after Jeff. So, but
so one of the things, even when Morgan and I are doing Green Lantern Corps, the thing that we are, hell bent, at least I'm really just like, dude, we've got to make sure that if you want to know what's going on in space in the DC universe, you got to read the Green Lantern books. Like, sometimes Green Lantern books get so siloed into it's just Green Lantern. But with what's happened to Thanagar, with the Ranians there, Space Cabbie's going to show up. Like, I want every space thing I can get to throw into these books because they're cops. It's like they need to run into the Omega Men or whatever, and I want them to be able to interact with all those different characters. And that's what a lot of the old I've been picking up a lot of old books, mostly just because the covers inspire me. I'm begging them to let's go back. I mean, obviously this Germanico cover is amazing, but I would kill if we could just do Silver Age covers, like Silver Age, like bananas covers where they're like, I'll die if I don't, drink this juice from the tree, whatever. They're always crazy. Even the old Superman ones where it's like, oh no, Lois Lane is marrying my arch nemesis, like all those stupid things.
Yeah. I just saw one, a classic Nick Cardy cover. I just saw it today. I was going back through and reading some Substacks from Tom Brevoort. He was talking about the first comic he ever bought. It's like Superman, like 268, I think. And Superman is flying, and he's carrying Clark Kent. He's like rushing him to the hospital because he's been poisoned. He's gonna die. I gotta get Clark Kent to the hospital. He's gonna die.
But I can't. I gotta see what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm like. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's the thing that I think I have behind me. I have all these covers of books on my little shelves, and I'm like, dude, those are the ones that immediately catch my eye. Immediately, I want to find out what's going on inside. That can't be the truth,
yeah.
And then you open it, and of course, it's not the truth. But that's the whole gimmick.
Yeah. That's the well. Let's talk a little bit about Green Lantern Corps. You've mentioned it a couple times. Morgan Hampton, who's been on the show, fantastic writer. So how has it been working with him? And the other thing that I want to talk about, to know what's going on in the cosmic DC corner, you're right. It should be the Green Lantern books that you're reading, the regular Green Lantern book and Green Lantern Corps. So talk a little bit about working with Morgan, but also, like in your mind, what's kind of the central difference between Green Lantern and I imagine the tone of Green Lantern may shift a little bit because now you're going to have this sort of book where you can have Kyle Rayner and Guy Gardner and John Stewart and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right now, they're both going to be kind of going toward the same goal. I think that inadvertently, I think Green Lantern Corps will stay mostly in space. There'll be a lot of stuff going on there. Hal will go back and forth. There's still some internal discussions, and by discussions I mean arguments about So like originally, I got an ask to there was like Kyle is in the main GL book with Hal. But they're kind of like Kyle has a subplot and with a couple of guest stars, which has been kind of interesting. I don't know if it's the right decision, but I'm working it out, man. Yeah. And then with Morgan, the funny thing is Morgan's a very talented writer, and I feel terrible that he's saddled with me because as happy-go-lucky as I am, I'm also like weirdly specific about certain things,
right?
Yeah. And I'm kind of like, no, we got to do this, or whatever. And but that's okay. I think Morgan's new enough that he's so humble about it. I'm sure he has a dartboard with my face on it, but we've gotten to a place where like he came over and I got my whiteboard out and we've just started breaking it in a way that I think is more holistic and gets us both on the same page and to figure it out, because I think it's hard. I think this was kind of a random pairing in a way. And so you're learning about somebody and you're learning about their writing style. And then you're trying to figure out how that works with your writing style. And so it's collaborative in a different form. And it's fun. It's interesting. It's definitely, I don't get to just sit down and stream of consciousness, whatever I want to do.
Right.
Which is what I do. So this is a different animal, but he's such a good guy. And, he's going to be one of those guys too, that like, we knew him when, and that's kind of That's kind of what I see. I mean, that guy will probably end up selling a movie somewhere, and then he will look twice at comics. No, just kidding. He probably will.
He probably
But,
no, in Morgan he will, but yeah, I know, yeah,
totally.
I know exactly what you're saying, and it's funny from my perspective. It's like people ask me, well, how do you get so and so to come on your show, or how do you get so and so to come on your show? And it's like I've been doing this long enough, and I mean, and even before I started doing it, reading comics long enough that I can spot talent. I'm pretty good at it, Like I had Tom King on before he'd written a single DC book.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
the first
awesome.
time I had Tom King on, it was at WonderCon, and he was hand selling his novella, Once Crowded Sky.
Amazing.
He hadn't even written Grayson yet. Um, and there it's a little bit self-serving because I want to be able to have books, people on that write good books that I get excited
Right.
about, and it's just more fun for everybody. It's more fun for the audience and whatever. So I do kind of go out of my way if I see somebody that I think is talented, or I hear them I meet them, or I talk to them on after a panel or whatever.
Yeah.
Morgan was one of those guys. Like the first time I ever saw Morgan, it was at WonderCon. He was on a panel for the Milestone Initiative with a couple of other writers, and why am I drawing him? Amy Chu that
Yeah.
ran that. And after the panel, I went up and introduced. I was like, man, he's going to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've stayed in touch. He's been on the show a couple times now, and yeah, he's going to be one of those guys. And then people are going to say, how can you get Morgan Hampton on your show whenever you want? And it's going to be.
He's a good guy, man. He's the type of guy like him and like Jeff and Tim are like that. They I think they approach story emotionally, and that's not how I approach story. But at the end of the day, we all have to end at the same location usually. But Tim and Jeff are incredible writers, so like so maybe I should be doing it the other way.
I think you do what works for you, and obviously what you've been doing.
That's all I can. That's all I can do, right?
So we, obviously you started with Flash, sort of singular character, Wally. We talked about how he'd really been the pinata. He'd been through so much.
Yeah.
And, fans of Wally love your run for that reason. Like you were talking about earlier, things are going to work out for him. Green Lantern is such a different animal as a property. We've never talked about this, but I'm kind of curious how it's, because it's not just a singular character, right? Like, yes, there are other Flashes, but you focused on Wally. There wasn't that much barrier, or whatever. But when you talk about Green Lantern, for some people, you say Green Lantern, and they're immediately going to think of Jon Stewart because their gateway was Justice League Unlimited cartoon, and that's who it was. Other people, they came up in the 90s, and it's Kyle, man. Kyle's the guy. Other old school guys like me, it's Hal Jordan, or some mix thereof, right? So it's sort of different. People have their particular... But Kyle, I specifically brought this up because Kyle has not had a very prominent role in recent years, and it seems like his story spotlight, or his star, if you will, is on the rise. So can you talk a little bit about that, and what's been your experience where people come up and say, hey, I want to see more of this Lantern or that Lantern or whatever, because everybody has their favorites.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the amount of ire I get, which about like, it's like, I want to see my favorite Earth Lantern.
Yep.
And if you don't, you're a horrible bigot or whatever.
Yeah.
But also, why are you just showing Earth Lanterns? I need to see aliens. And I'm just like, I would need 50 books,
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was a serious, to me, it was a delicate balancing act because it was, it was a Hal-centered book. But as we started building it out, you started getting more and more of those characters. And then I tried to give them enough to do. And then, thank goodness, we started doing backups with these incredible writers and artists to give them more of a showcase, right? And in particular, Kyle, it's funny because the minute I started doing Wally, people were like, well, where's Kyle? I'm like, hey, what? This is a book about Wally West.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, but Kyle needs to show up. And at the time, it was like Kyle, there was like, I couldn't use him for some reason. And then so having Kyle back and then having him in a brief stint as a White Lantern because of the emotional spectrum, because I think he's very special. But this book is from the point of view of Hal, and I think it will be for a while. But I think DC would be foolish not to realize that the lust for Kyle is out there, and I actually think he has a really intriguing story to tell. And because like this is the other thing about Kyle, not only the White Lantern thing, but people that are really ensconced in like deep into the Green Lantern lore, the fact that the Predator showed up again
Yeah.
should give them pause, because the last time we saw any of those creatures, oh man, how much can I spell? But like Kyle was involved in that. That's all I can say. So I think Kyle is really important. Kyle is also, I also think that like, you know, I have to be clever enough to be like, you know, I can use these characters, but if I overuse them, people are going to be mad.
Yeah.
If I underuse them, people are going to be bad. It's just the virtue of the internet. With, I think what we're doing is there's some interesting subplots going on in the main Green Lantern with Kyle, which is fun. There's a bit of a fetch quest going on in the book, and Kyle has a couple friends that are going to help him in that. But I also think that in the Green Lantern Corps, we're going to try to like, there's going to be an A and B plot, and one's going to be focused on one character, B's going to be focused on another character, and then we'll do that for a couple episodes, and then we'll do a couple other Green Lanterns. You know, we'll keep rotating that because we're building to something in the summer that will take place between both books that I think will be really exciting, and really interesting, and a different tone for Green Lantern, which is really fun.
Well,
so go ahead.
Yeah, is it fair to say that at some point, I mean, it is Green Lantern Corps, so at some point you should be able to give a little more of a spotlight, you know, maybe a particular issue focuses or an arc focuses on Kyle or Guy or, you know, Jessica or whomever. Yeah,
and you know, me, part of it is when I can't get a handle on a character, when there's not something that I can particularly like, there's a character that I'm like, this character doesn't connect with me. My general inclination is not to discard that character. My general inclination is to make that character connect with me. Like, so, Teen Lantern is a character that I was like, I don't know about this character. And in Jeff Thorne's run, she was in a coma. And so then it was like, what am I going to do with this character? And it just kind of fell in place in a way, but there's more to it. And then when Philip made Ellie, I was like, oh, you know, it kind of reminds me of Quiz Kid and Fair Play when I put them in the Jay Garrick book. I was like, there was just a crackle there that I was like, oh, this is neat.
Yeah.
There's a friendship here that's just like very strange and interesting. It's sort of like Bart and Ace, you know, that I was like, oh, these guys are great. And so with Ellie and Kelly, I was like, this is really fun. There's something very interesting and sweet about this, but I don't just sit there. I try to plumb the depths of that a little bit. But all those characters, because there's some characters I just don't know enough about, you know, and thank goodness Morgan's there because he's starting to do a lot of the heavy lifting, doing some of the research that I'm trying to too. But like I've written a lot of Jessica, but Joe, I don't know as much, though I showcased her in the Green Lantern book, and I tried to figure out like, okay, she's kind of a detective, she's kind of this, and try to make distinct personalities. I think we have a good turn for Jessica coming up, and I think it's, you know, as much as the status quo is being reset, there's still a lot of interesting. For every answered question, I present two more unanswered questions, which I know makes some people crazy, but if you just take a step back, so far a lot of the stuff that happened, I've tied a lot of those loose threads up. Some people don't think so, but I have.
Yeah. Well, and the other part is, I mean, you give Jeff a lot of credit for what he did, and you're creating some, you know, vast emotional spectrum and whatever. But to your point, like even when it was just the Green Lantern Corps, you already had so many, you know, and so many. There's been plenty that have been taken off the table, you know. You know, John Stewart's wife. Why am I drawing a blank?
Aricia? No.
Katumi.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and so many of them. But then you bring in, okay, now we have some people's favorite Lantern is Atrocitus. You know, they love the Red Lantern. or Dexter because he's a cat, or you know, I've
Right.
never met anybody whose favorite is Indigo One from the Indigo Lanterns.
Right.
But there's still a lot to be explored there.
No,
One
yeah,
of my-
and then
one of my
brought in-
favorites is Saint Walker, you know, Blue
Yeah.
Lantern. Like I love Saint Walker, whatever. But it's like to your point earlier, you're not. It's not a 50-page book, and it's not 50 books a month either. You know? It's 20
And
pages.
exactly. And then when you get going, there's an event, and you got to back up. But also, like what we're saying now, and I think what I'm trying to impress, at least in this book too, is that willpower isn't an emotion.
Yeah.
To me, I think fundamentally what I think is interesting is that willpower isn't an emotion. Willpower is the mechanism by which you control emotion.
Yeah.
That's true in all of our lives. So, am I going to be too greedy? It's like, no, pull yourself back. It's a little bit of self-control. So using that as a mechanism that can control what's going on, that can help focus some of those energies, I think will be critical coming up too.
Yeah, and on that point, what's fascinating to me, and this I've always thought that the same thing that you're just talking about. It's not willpower's not really an emotion, and the fact that it's sort of the first one, and this is just pure dumb luck that it happened this way. But if you look at the classic color spectrum, right, and that mnemonic device that we all learned in science class, right, Roy G. Biv, the G's in the G's in the middle.
Totally.
G is in the middle. That's so serendipitous, right? If it's the one that
totally
controls
is.
everything else, because it's in the middle. I mean, yes, you have black and white. You could put them both, both on one end or the other, or whatever. And there's so many other emotions. You know, we've got Nathan Broom that you mentioned, Gray Lantern, Star Lantern, whatever. But the fact that of the ones we know, red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet, the G is in the middle. That's just so fascinating.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's like, man, somebody up there knew what they were doing, but
totally.
Yeah, it's crazy, but so I have the cover up here. Everybody, if you're watching on YouTube,
cool cover.
The Green Lantern, Fractured Spectrum. So that one's coming next month. It's going to be in comic shops January 8th.
Yep.
Final order cutoff is December 16th. So if you're listening to this first day or second day that it comes out, you have a few days to let your comic shop know. I highly encourage you to do that. You can help Jeremy out, help your comic shop out, help Ken out. Let him
help me get power. Yes. Bye.
Exactly. And then the Green Lantern core book that we were talking about earlier. Let me see if I can get the right image up.
It's out in February. I know that.
Yeah, it's coming out in February. There we go. So I have the date for that. That one's going to be in comic shops February 12th. So just in time for Valentine's Day, everybody.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a little more time. Final order cutoff for that. It's not until January 20th. But that doesn't mean that you can't tell your retailer now, hey, I'm going to be looking to get this, whatever. The more that you talk about these books with the retailer and let them know, the better for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And kind of on that note.
Fernando's so excited about Green Lantern Corps, by the way. Fernando Passeron is so pumped about it. And you can tell in the pages. When you see these pages, you're going to be like, geez, slow down, dude.
And he is so... His pencils are so detailed and so amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah. Really, really looking forward to it. But on the note of giving you more power and giving you more books, it wasn't announced at New York Comic Con, I think?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So, at that big panel, it was like we went up and the Absolute guys came up. Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. Obviously, can't say too much about it because again, we don't want to spoil, and it's yet to come out or whatever. But I did see an image of Aquaman and Mira, Arthur and Mira, and they were holding a little baby, but it wasn't Andy. It was a little.
Yeah, that was just a coloring mistake. They fixed it. They fixed it in the final. The PDF they sent out was like, everybody's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Calm down, everybody, calm down."
Because we were wondering. Like, he does have a son, but like he got killed way back when, pre-crisis.
Yeah. So, but don't worry. None of it will matter by the end of the first issue.
All right. What? I haven't heard the story. Like, was this something that you had in mind? Was it something DC approached you? Hey, you have a pitch for Aquaman? Like, why? Or was it just that checklist of, hey, I'm following Justice?
No, it's just wildly coincidence when it comes to the fact that I'm on the Jeff Johns track. Couldn't be a better track to be on. I mean, it's so funny. He's such a nice guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if it was anybody else, people would be like, "Oh, look at this loser that's trying." It's not like that at all. It's like, I'm fortunate because Jeff is the type of guy who's made such a massive impact into comic books that you can never dull his impact. And
Yeah.
he's such a guy and he's such a helpful guy. Anyways, Aquaman. So obviously, again, this is back to that thing of like I always reuse stuff that I put in. So Flashpoint Beyond, I put in this Pearl, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward, I put it in Flash. And then they asked me to do a Brave and the Bold with Miss Martian and Jackson Hyde.
Yep.
And I said, hey, what if it's about this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to think, it was Ben Mears or whatever. He's like, that's too good of an idea. Like you should save that for an Aquaman pitch. And I was like, oh, okay. Like you're turning down a good idea. That's weird. And but I was like, I'm gonna do this with the Pearl and blah blah. Within my head, when somebody says that, that's catnip for me too. It's my brain, the subconscious brain starts fiddling away. So I texted Paul and I said, hey, if you ever are taking pitches on Aquaman, I think I have one. And he was like, oh, thank goodness. We haven't done Aquaman in a while. And we were thinking maybe you would be, I was like, great. And so we got on the phone. And I said, this is kind of what I want to do. And then, the hiccups were absolute power ended. And so people's powers have shifted a little bit.
Yep.
There is a thread very specifically at the last image of the book that it directly ties into the all-in special and something that's going to carry over into mini books, a bit of a mystery. But then, there's this part of me that's just like trying, I'm talking about this thing called the blue, not probably because I'm doing so much emotional spectrum work, but like having worked in the Flash with putting Maxine and the red and dealing with the green, guarding the power battery in Oa. And I was like, there should be a blue,
Right. Makes sense.
and it should encompass, as I started doing research, it's like, oh, there's this thing called the confluence and there's all this other stuff that I think should be under the umbrella of the blue. And the more I thought about it, the more excited I was because I was like, there is no life without water, and there's an element of that's really intriguing. And then the other part of it that I think is interesting, and I kept thinking, I wonder if Aquaman misses eating hamburgers. Like that was like a weird thought I had, but I was like, I would just be so miserable underwater, being like, I need a hot meal, there's some of those things that I was just like, he's a kid that was raised on land, this continuity. This isn't the Peter David Tarzan thing, but it's like he was a lighthouse keeper's kid. And I'm sure he learned to ride a bike and and so that got me thinking, like, I don't know as much about Aquaman as a man as I probably should. And as I go back, I don't know too much about his internal thought life. I know of Aquaman as, and that's where that first page of the book comes from. It's like, I know Aquaman as he's this kid, from, these two different, his mom and the lighthouse keeper. And then, I know him as a superhero and I know of him as Mira's husband. And I know of him as a king, but I don't really know him.
Yeah.
Those are all monikers and you can kind of just like, my favorite version of Aquaman was, Batman Brave and the Bold. Like, it was outrageous. Like, I love that version because it gave him a character that I was like, I get this. I get what this is. And Jason Momoa was very much in that vein of like, oh, I get what that is. Rather than just stoic guy, So I even like with Hal or Wally, I tend to start thinking like, what is their internal thought life? Like, is he okay with being all these things? Is he okay with the burden of being king and father? And, even as a guy who's a husband and a father, which I love, but there's a certain weight to it. There's a certain responsibility to it. And you have a nostalgic look of like, man, remember when I was in college and I could stay up late and eat whatever I want? Like that was great. I wouldn't trade it for what I have now, but I do think that like I think those are things to wrestle with. And I'm not so clever that I can write political intrigue. So, right away I'm like, yeah, I can't do the Atlantean, West Wing.
Yeah.
Like I can't do that. I'm not that smart. So I'm starting to dip my toe into an Aquaman that has very high fantasy leanings. And I think it'll be interesting. I hope it'll be interesting.
Well, last time somebody tried to lean into the political stuff, it didn't go over very well at all, and he was off the book real quickly. That was terrible situation.
I just can't, like I said, there was an episode I tried to pitch when I was at Supernatural, an episode of, I said, let's shoot it just like the West Wing. Like it will be hilarious. There's a demon in the White House and the boys are conscripted to come in as Secret Service. And I was like, it would be awesome. We'll just do a bunch of walking talkies, and we'll try to make them hyper intelligent. And Jensen, Dean would have no idea what they're saying, but like Sam would totally get. Anyways, but I can't. But the reality is, it's like that's a certain type of book that somebody else could do. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, well, I don't think fans want it because, like I said, when they tried to do it, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's people out there that'll know what I'm talking about. We covered it on the show at the time. But to your point, it's interesting, especially for a character that's been around as long as, decades, right? 70 years, I think, closing on 80 years for Aquaman. And yeah, he is like, okay, describe his personality. Well, he's stoic guy. He's guy that feels, torn between two worlds. But who he actually is he somebody I would actually want to hang out with? And Jeff tried to do a little bit of it. Like I remember that first New 52 issue, if you recall, he's in the diner.
In the diner,
he orders fish, and everybody looks at him sideways, like you're eating fish, and he's like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I eat?" Like I don't really talk to fish, you know what I mean? And,
yeah. That was cool, and but even like Hal, I remember Hal has the same. He had the same issue in my mind a little bit because a lot of those Silver Agey, the Bronze Age were such ciphers that you could attribute anything, and he was kind of a hothead, arrogant, blah blah blah. Yeah. And so putting that on him is great, but then when you peel it back, like specifically when Hal and Barry are talking on that building, and I remember I got a flack for putting that scene in, them talking about their feelings, and it was like, why do we have to have this? And I was like, this is awesome. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
This is these two veteran superheroes having a conversation about the legacy character stepping up and them, kind of like, what are we doing? And all the insecurities and all that stuff, because I think that broadens the dimension of who Hal is. And so the same thing with Arthur. I really want to dig into, and by the way, this sounds very snooty, us talking about this, because if you know me, it's going to be like, I really want to dig into the character / fight giant thing, blow up stuff. Yeah. Watch how I can abuse John Tim so that he can just make the coolest artwork ever. So, I say that in terms of the macro, like I want to get into this character, but at the same time, I'm like, dear John, please draw this awesome thing. And then he does it. And you're like, crap, that was really good.
Yeah, there's still going to be plenty of action and plenty of fun. And kind of on that note, can you tease, like, do you have, it's Aquaman. I got to imagine Black Manta's going to show up at some point as well. And that's the thing. That the other reason that Aquaman, other than, hey, he talks to fish, let's make a joke out of him, he has some really bizarre, like, old school villains that aren't, Shipwreck and, Orca, and it goes sideways really quickly. So can you tease at all who are some of the villains, and maybe you're kind of come up with some new villains? We want them.
Yeah, there will be some new villains. There'll also be, I try to stay away. Like if you notice in my Flash run, I never use reverse flash or zoom.
Yeah,
like I just wouldn't do it because I just can't do it. Yeah. I can't do it in a way that's going to be like, and even in Green Lantern, those Sinestro's in there, I think Sinestro's a different character now. He's just such a different character. But Theros and Veron and Unseeing, like I'd much rather kind of broaden and add toys to the toy box. I think that's what I'm trying to do with Aquaman. There are going to be characters that you recognize, but I don't think they'll be who you think. And I also think that somebody like Black Manta, I'm not going to put him in, at least in the first arc of what I'm trying to do. I have in my mind 3 arcs, and I'm concentrating on the first arc. If sales totally tank and no one likes this book whatsoever, then it'll just be the first arc. Yeah. But I know what I think the second and third arc should be, and the second arc specifically, I think will have a lot more opportunity to do some other characters. But right now, this is definitely going to be kind of an Aquaman lost and learning about himself again, and a lot of interesting characters will crop up into it. The second issue will definitely start presenting the idea of a certain prophecy that's going to carry through the first arc quite a bit. But I don't bury the lead. The first 3 pages of this book, it's like, this is what it is. Oh, by the way, a year before, let's see how that happens. So we'll see. We'll see if this works, Jace. I'm terrified about it because I think Aquaman is a heavy lift. It's not. It's never. Nobody's always like, oh yeah, like that's the Aquaman book. That's what I need to pull.
Yeah.
Like that's not necessarily. There are Aquaman fans that will always get Aquaman, but I think those are fewer than the people I'm trying to draw everybody into this book. And I think together we're going to go on this journey of going, like, hopefully by the end, the goal is to be like, effing Aquaman, man. Like, this guy is legit. Like, this guy should, I mean, his power set is already really, really high. I think exploring that a little bit will be interesting. Now that he has hydrokinesis, it's going to be interesting. So I'm trying, Jace. We'll see.
I feel, in a way, I feel bad for Aquaman fans because, like we said, and I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, Aquaman's my favorite character. And I think it's part of the reason that we're saying, like, he hasn't really been fleshed out that much. And I remember when Kelly Sue got put on the book, and she was kind of saying some of the same things. Well, we're going to tear him down and build him back up, and he's going to be lost and kind of search it. But she lost him in such a way that he didn't even know who he was because he didn't have his memories. He had amnesia. So
not like that.
Him finding himself was just him regaining his memories. But I still love that run a lot because of Robson Roca, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But his art on that run is fantastic. But don't worry, Aquaman fans, it's going to be a different animal.
Yeah, it's going to be much more Aquaman a la Conan the Barbarian. What is the riddle of the ocean?
Well, I love the idea of the blue, because here's what it just makes sense, because like you said, we have the red, we have the black, we have the green. But here's what's fascinating to me, and maybe this will be, who knows how long you'll stay in the book, but 4th arc or whatever. I know you love to hear my crazy ideas. So in our solar system, there isn't necessarily life on other planets, but there is water.
Right.
So the red and the green and the black or whatever, they may not extend out past Earth, but the blue could possibly exist,
Correct,
in the moons of Europa, and that's
correct, Jay.
So
correct, Jay. You got it.
I don't know.
We're very aligned with that.
I'm just spitballing. I mean, you do also write Green Lantern, so I'm just
right. But I also think about. Did you ever see? You've seen Grant Morrison's map of the 52 universes, and that's super cool. Omega Bandman's belt.
Yeah.
I also think there's also room, if you're looking at it as like these primordial emotional forces, like the emotional spectrum. It seems like there has to be a connection. I've already played with it a little bit with the green and green. The red and the red and rage, there seems to be you could have a connection there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But blue and hope, there seems like there could be a variable connection there. And it would be really cool. I don't have plans for it yet, but in my head,
Yeah,
there's something to that.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do also want to talk about Flash Gordon that you have over at Mad Cave, but real
Yeah.
quick, somebody asked me to ask about this, and I forgot.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go back. We're gonna
Is
backtrack
that
real
person
quick
Rocky?
to Green Lantern. The Guardians are back. Guardians of the Universe are back,
Yes,
but
ish.
there's Well, that's my point. And again, we don't want to spoil, but just you can tease because the line at the end of the latest issue of Green Lantern is, "Hey, the Guardians are back, but they're changed. They're different." So will we be seeing more of them and kind of learn as we go how they've changed and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the fracture spectrum will have a bit of that. The extent to the mysteries surrounding the Guardians will unfurl. But that was a weird thing too, because that was one of the first things I thought of was when John Stewart had that God power and he split himself in two in Jeff Thorne's run, and then he had made this kind of like source ball lantern.
Yep.
And I just kept thinking the beginning of Jeff Thorne's run was the Guardians were all twisted and messed up and then they disappeared. And I thought, oh, that would be cool if John subconsciously or unwittingly, we're bringing Guardians into this ball. Like this was kind of like a chamber of healing in a way or something.
Yeah.
Or new Guardians, or whatever. And they prematurely got, Kyle and Veron popped the bubble, and it was like,
oh, here they are.
So now those characters are going to have a unique part to play. It's not going to be like they were, but the fractured spectrum will have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you say new Guardians, and I think of Millennium.
I know, which I'm a huge fan of. Obviously, I tried to get not just Tom Kalamaku, but I tried to get the Floronic Man, but they wouldn't let me use Floronic Man, which I thought would have been perfect for I wrote it that way. I was like, Floronic Man and Thomas, they're the last of the new Guardians,
Yeah. Well, isn't Extraño, isn't he still around?
Yeah. I don't think so, though. I don't think Extraño was. I was looking, and continuity is a fuzzy thing.
Yes.
So
yeah, I just remember that Joe Staten art, man. It was so classic.
Dude, Millennium, the hype for Millennium when I was a kid was so massive, and it just did not deliver like that. Like when it was like, these are the new Guardians, I was like, that guy's a sunflower. Like I remember being like so annoyed. I was like, what is happening?
I tried to read it again a few years ago, and like the McCarthyian overtones with who's a manhunter. It's so cringe.
I there's a line in there. I think it's in Millennium. It says "Tough Times 1988" or something. And Tim and I were joking about. I got him a shirt that says "Tough Times 1988." It's like the most obscure line from a Millennium book or whatever, or maybe it was from a New Guardians book. But yeah, Flash Gordon's been really, really fun. What's really fun about Flash Gordon is King Features and Mad Cave have been really very just like cool about me just taking it wherever I want to take it a little bit. And it's definitely just a serialized sci-fi adventure book. And Will has been killing it on the art. And he's the one who gets the brunt of like, hey, you can't make this look too much like this. And so he has to really thread the needle and make something that like Ming, it's like, okay, I get it. We don't want to, play into the yellow scare, prejudicial stuff of when that came out. But he does an incredible job of kind of capturing the essence of these characters as aliens or whatever. But man, that's been really fun. That's been a really surprisingly just like release book that I get to write, where it's just like, yeah, I'm going to give them syringe hands and Will, what do you want? You want dinosaurs? Okay, dinosaur bad guys. Like, there's a lot of us just kind of throwing things against the wall. And I saw somebody go, well, this feels a lot like Star Wars. I'm like, well, great, because that's who Star Wars stole from. So
one of the things that I love about it, I didn't expect, because I knew you were on it for a while and was looking forward to it and what have you. And I, again, the whole idea of blowing up planets and getting out there and wild ideas. And we talked about this when we talked about it at New York Comic Con about how for a large portion of the population, younger generation, they didn't grow up with Flash Gordon serials. Those people have kind of moved on. So I think people aren't as familiar with it as maybe they might be, other than maybe the Sam Jones movie, which was,
Right.
very much a pastiche in a lot of ways.
Right.
Didn't take itself too seriously. So I was
Right.
kind of curious to see how you were going to go. Was it going to be a little more hard sci-fi, or was it going to lean into the kind of campiness? You've taken this ground with sort of middle ground where it's been some great action. The Will Conrad art, gorgeous, obviously.
Right.
But there's a level of humor, but the humor is kind of smart humor, which I enjoy. But the other thing that I didn't expect, man, there's every argument you could make that this is a romance book, at least for the first 4 issues. It's just all about getting back to Dale, man. That's his
Right.
driving force.
Right. Right. No, you're not wrong. I mean, but that's the I used to talk my passion for pulp sci-fi and just pulp novels in general. Like I remember being in college and I was working at a college movie theater, and there's these 2 guys. They were pretty much like Waldorf and Statler, and they would like I would be sitting there in film school, and I would come to them and say, "Oh, we watched this," and they'd be like, "That's garbage. Like you should be watching Powell and Pressburger, or you should be reading this." And they gave me such an incredible education, and when they said I had to read John Carter of Mars, and I was like, really? And they're like, everybody's stolen from this book. And I was like, okay. So Edgar Rice Burroughs, read John Carter of Mars. I lose my mind. I'm like, this is the greatest sci-fi series ever, because they're not, it's not like sci-fi where they try to explain the science of everything.
Right,
It's
yeah.
very loose sci-fi, right? It's just like, yeah, the blah, blah, blah. Like they just say something. And you're like, that sounds pretty good, and because they were getting paid per word. And then when I was working with Bruce Timm on Batman Soul of the Dragon, we would talk about pulp stuff all the time. And he got me really interested in like the Parker novels and stuff. And I read those, and they're so much fun. And so this is really a direct representation of that, where it is fun. And it was like all those novels were like, oh, you got to go save this girl.
Yeah.
You got to go. And what's more than that, what's really fun is that these characters are all established. Ming and all these things are established, but most of us only have like a cursory knowledge of them. And even when you go back, you realize, oh, so no one wrote about how Ming became Ming? Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do it then, So there's this really fun thing where I get to add to the mythology of it, introduce people to it, but also you're in for a rollicking ride. It's not too heady. Like, you're not going to sit there afterwards going like, oh, I feel terrible about my life. You're going to be more like, wow, that was cool. That's neat. I wonder what's going to happen next. I mean, those are my real goals with that. And then, you try to twist it in certain ways, because I'm trying to think what issue came out.
4 just
4?
came. Yeah,
4
came
out?
Yeah.
I haven't got my comps yet, so I'm just a little bit like, 4 came out, and you have some wrinkles when it comes to Zarkov and some other stuff that is just super quirky sci-fi stuff that I get to throw in there. And Ming, he's always going to be bad. He's going to be bad. Everybody knows he's going to be.
Flash definitely knows. Yeah.
Flash knows he's going to try to screw him every moment, but you can't, but still he's Flash. He's got to save, And then the whole looming, the gloomy cloud is the fact that Flash blew up Mongo.
Yeah.
Which is just like
the planet killer.
Yeah. Which is, that's dark too,
Well, the other part about Ming is he's, because of the Mogo's gone and he doesn't have, this army at his fingertips or whatever, he's been a little more hands-on than I've certainly ever seen him in anything, which is fun because he's not really the kind of character that likes to get his hands dirty, except when he does, right? Like we see that in his origin. He does that, and then he ascends and, does what he does to his parents or whatever, and then he gets to sit back and do whatever. But now he's kind of almost taken all the way back, where he even says it at one point. He's like, yeah, I did what I did when I, gained power over Mogo. When he goes into the planet Death and has to consolidate his power again. So it's fantastic.
It's fun. It's fun, and that's that the whole first arc. I'm just like, there's that escape from prison. Who doesn't love a prison escape story?
Yeah, and you got so you blew up Mogo there. You blew up.
You keep saying Mogo, and it's just because. And by the way, I have to keep checking myself too, because I'm writing Green Lantern, and I'm like, it's one letter,
Yeah.
and it's a giant planet.
Bongo, Mogo, yeah. Well, you blew up Thanagar.
I
So
know. I blow up planets, dude.
yeah.
I am all about blowing up planets.
So I'm gonna
That
be curious.
Thanagar, yeah, there's a lot of stuff's going on with Thanagar. Yeah, that's going to be crazy because only a few of them survived.
We'll see how you manage to. So, I mean, your two series you're writing, you blew up a planet. So
Yeah.
I'll be really curious how you blow up a planet in Aquaman. That's quite a
Dude, it's
challenge.
gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
Well, it's been fantastic catching up, Jeremy. Thanks for taking the time to be my first guest for 12 Days of the Comic Source. We got to finish with this since it is a holiday episode. What are the traditions over there at the Adams household for holidays? I know you have a couple of young daughters, so Christmas must be a wild and fun time over there.
Oh my gosh, I brought up my whiteboard and we just started writing the things that we're going to do. This is the first time since I've been married that even when we were dating, we both have never been in our own place for Christmas. We've always gone to like her parents or my parents. And so this is ultra magical. So there are certain movies we want to watch. You can open one present the night before. Elf on the Shelf is like running around like a gremlin. We'll probably go ice skating. We're going to go see the Muppet Christmas Carol that's playing at a theater near us, which is it's a must for us. There's always a candlelight service at church, man. Like we hit Christmas like hard, generally, but because we get to be home, it's even better. And the thing when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of Christmas traditions. I don't know if it was just because we were really poor or what. I had a single mom, but my mom and our tradition was we'd watch the Star Wars 4, 5, and 6. And my brother and sister would pretty much bail after 4. But my mom and I would hang on and we'd do 4, 5, and 6 during the day. And that was like our weird Christmas. That must just been like the only VHSs we had. And that was our kind of Christmas tradition every year. So I wonder if I can rope my kids into that. But we just watched like all of them. So I doubt they'll be thrilled for that.
Yeah, they're probably a little too young for the greatest Christmas movie of all time, but maybe in a couple of years.
I know. I think about that too. Somebody told me they let their kid. I'm like, I don't know. Last time I saw that, I'm assuming we're talking about Die Hard.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Making sure. We went to the theater a few years ago and we saw it. I think it was when the Cinerama Dome was around or something, and we watched it. And then afterwards, we drove over to Nakatomi Plaza, the Fox building. And we rolled up into the little roundabout there at the front. We're like, man, this is way smaller than it looks like.
Yeah.
But what a great movie, man. Oh my gosh.
I literally just watched it 2 days ago. Yeah, it's so fantastic. I haven't seen it.
Yep.
I haven't seen it in the movie theater in a long time, but I really would love to go see it on the big screen again. I remember going to see it opening weekend or what have you. But it's one of those movies, and tell me if it was like this when you went to see, because I went and saw Predator a few years ago, and it was like every time there was a good line coming up, like, get to the chopper, the whole audience, get to the chopper, and they're cheering.
Yep. It's the best thing. My buddy Jim and I, we just went and saw Ninja 3: The Domination at midnight, which is like the craziest thing ever, because I'm not built for, I used to go to midnight movies all the time.
Yeah.
There's like an age where you're like, nope. And I think Jim and I were playing chicken with each other or whatever, but we went. And one of my favorite things at the New Bev, they'll do themed trailers beforehand. So they're like, well, we're watching the third Ninja movie, so the trailers are all going to be like number 3s of canon movies. So it was like Missing in Action 3 and Death Wish 3 or whatever. And I knew it was going to be a fun night because there's quite a few people there, but there was a moment where this guy says to Chuck Norris, like Braddock, right? And says, hey, Braddock, don't step on any toes. And Braddock goes, I don't step on toes. I step on necks. And like the place is like, yeah, And so once Ninja 3: The Domination happened, it was like, this is why you used to go to movies.
Yeah.
It was like, hell yeah. And, I don't know the last time. I mean, I felt those moments. I remember like Whiplash, or when I saw Creed, that first Creed movie, the very end of that, when the Rocky song hits, I was about to rip a chair out of the ground. I was so pumped. But anyways, I agree. Die Hard. Awesome. I'm not going to show them that yet. They already get mad at me for like if they see something in they saw Super Sons and my daughter said afterwards like, so why did you put those bad words in there? And I'm like, you know, they were mild bad words.
Yeah, I think my daughter was 11. We showed her Die Hard for the first time.
Okay.
And yeah, she was like, yeah, that was, I mean, it just doesn't hit for, I mean,
I know.
whatever. We have daughters. We love them.
I know.
Special
I know.
relationship between a dad and a
Yeah.
daughter. But it's
Yeah.
not, I remember watching Die Hard for the first time with my son, and yeah, he got it. You know, he was like,
No,
yeah.
totally. He's wearing wife beaters.
Yeah.
There's like no shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or what was the movie, like when he was growing up, the movie that it was before DVDs.
Yeah.
And he wore it out. Like the first 3 minutes of the movie were just all snow because he'd watched it so many times. And it was The Matrix. It was the first Matrix movie.
Yeah.
Like he just loved, and he was way too young when he probably saw it.
Yeah.
He's
Totally. I was gonna say, yeah.
He's probably like 3 or 4 years old when he saw it the first time, and he would just watch it over and over and over. Like I said, he wore it out. And I remember coming home from work one day. It was when I was bartending, and it was actually the next day because I'd come home late. He would already be asleep, and I remember him doing the pose like Lawrence Fishburne, where turns his hand and he like beckons him, and he goes, Dad, do you want a piece of meat? Not do you want a piece of me, but a piece of meat. Because in his 3-year-old or 4-year-old head,
That's great. That's freaking great, dude.
I almost fell over laughing. It was so
That's
funny.
great. That's so great.
Well, have a wonderful Christmas, Jeremy.
You too. Merry Christmas, man.
Yeah, and excited that you're getting to start those traditions with your daughters.
Yeah, I too, yeah.
All I got to say is take a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure your wife has covered.
Oh no, I'm the guy.
You're the guy.
Here's a terabyte of pictures, child. Yeah.
Because you'll definitely want to look back on the first Christmas you guys had in your own home when the time is right. So, well, don't forget, everybody. We have the Fractured Spectrum special coming January 8th, same day that Aquaman #1 is going to be in comic shops, and then coming in later in February, the Green Lantern Corps, and obviously keep up with the Green Lantern. You can pick up the first couple trades if you want to catch up with what Jeremy's been doing. So highly recommend his stuff. That's why we always cover it on the show. It's why we love having him on to talk about the book. So remind everybody, if they do want to ask questions or follow your work, where's the best place to follow you online?
Instagram and X, I guess. That's about it. I've like stationed in the other ones, but I don't have the routine of going there,
Yeah, Blue Skies, I gotta say, I'm spending more and more time over there because it's just it's just nicer. And it's a good comic community over there. So, but I'll put links to Jeremy's social media in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can go and click there. So, Jeremy and I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. Hope everyone's having a healthy one and enjoying themselves, time off work, and spending time with friends and family. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate you joining as always. And we'll talk to you next time.